Welcome after the break. For those just joining, please remember to ask questions on Slack in the main channel. I will collect them and try to address the speaker at the end of presentation. So right now, we have with us Nana, currently a VP of Technology in Depop, previously worked in fields such as telecoms, investment banking, education, aviation, operations management, which pretty much adds up to plus 10 years of Agile training, transformation coaching up to plus 15 years, and more than 25 years in technology leadership whatsoever. She's also an author of a recently published book, Beyond Digital Transformation, Advancing Tech for Accelerated Growth, which talks about the significant changes needed in the tech industry to achieve agility and growth. Well, in today's talk, working with globally distributed Agile teams, she will focus on some challenges that might arise and how to approach them. Nana, over to you.
Thank you very much, Magda. And that was a great introduction, by the way. And hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be speaking for the first time at AgileByExample. And I'm going to be talking about working with globally distributed Agile teams. And before we get started, I'm really keen to know who's in the room today. So if we can use Slack for a moment, I have a couple of questions to ask you. And the first one is, can you share which country you're currently in? And by the way, I'm calling from the UK. Amazing. Amazing. Wow. Lots from Poland. And by the way, I've been to Warsaw before, which is an absolutely amazing place. So it's good to see so many from Poland and Spain and the UK as well. Fantastic. And the other question I wanted to ask is, can you share, if you work in a company, what model you are working with? Are you fully remote, fully office-based, or do you have some sort of hybrid arrangement? So remote, office, or hybrid? This is great. So, wow, my goodness. So a lot more on the hybrid situation. Wow. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. I think this is great, and I think this will really help with the talk in itself. So first of all, I'd like to share with you my Agile experience and background and my story. So I'll start first off by talking about how I came across Agile, and it kind of started years before I even heard the word used in the technology industry. And I came from a working culture back in the early 90s where the waterfall method was the way of working. And through that, in those days, I was a software engineer, and the experience in those environments was often unpleasant, at best an uncomfortable one. We often had to give committed timescales for our work and projects, and we usually have to do it way in advance. And I saw failure after failure of projects as deadlines flew past, work was usually unfinished, and we were put under pressure to work late into the night and into the weekends. And I bet you can imagine this. We had release dates that were committed to customers and within the business. And usually we didn't have input into those timescales, but yet we had to meet them. And I remember many times when a project manager or an engineering manager or a team leader would be literally standing behind me as I was bowed down, writing my code, asking me when I was going to complete that work. And I found those times to be really, really stressful. So in my spare time, over a coffee, at weekends, I would dream of a world where we, the developers and the teams, were more in control of our destiny and the journey we took in building products. And then one year, we had the opportunity. Magda just mentioned my book. I write the experience about this in my book. And the experience was that we had the opportunity where customers were very dissatisfied with what we were producing. And it made us change the way we work. So we became more agile. We put the customer first. We built better products in a way that was more manageable. and we're able to work in a more achievable way to make sure that we met the expectations of our customers. And then several years later, around 2005, when I was then leading engineering teams, a member of my team, and I remember this so well, told me that some of the ideas we were discussing about a better way to work reminded him of a new approach called Agile. He pointed me at a website called Mountain Goat, and I have to say, from that point on, I was sold, and we adopted Agile and its principles. It was early days, but it was a really great beginning. And fast forward to today, I've really enjoyed working with Agile teams and seen the benefits, and also been involved in transformations of teams across businesses to successfully adopt Agile techniques and, more importantly, satisfy customers and deliver faster. And one of those experiences is the story I would like to share with you, the experience of driving the formation of a global Agile team and what we achieved. So a few years ago now, I was working for a large global enterprise organization. And at that time, we had a product which served our customers across the world. Overall, we had a global R&D team of more than 300 people spread across 10 countries and 4 continents, working on the same code base. However, one of the key strategic product domain areas was uninvested and was really struggling to deliver results for our global market. The team was quite small in number, and they operated out of one of our offices. And this team had been working for many years and were a very close-knit team of very smart engineers and product analysts. And each one had their own areas of expertise in terms of skills and knowledge. But in a way, they operated in silos. And unfortunately, they had been fixing bugs, and a lot of bugs, for a long time. So they had hardly released any new features. And some areas of the product were very complicated and risky to change. And so they weren't able to touch any of those areas in case they broke existing functionality. And in all of this, it slowed down their progress. Meanwhile, customers and business partners were getting really frustrated that there was little movement on the product, and they were working with an old, buggy solution. Now, at this time, I was asked to come in to create a new function which was capable of being successful, to drive innovation and essentially give our global customers what they needed to be successful. We needed people, and we found them across our business in Germany, in France, the UK, Austria, and elsewhere. And that was amazing. So to cut a very long story short, I brought my team together from around the globe. Each set of colleagues came with their different nationalities and culture, their ways of working, as well as their own background or skills and experiences. Bringing together this group had its challenges, with people speaking different languages, with different cultures and identities and expertise, knowledge and working methods, and of course, living in different countries. There was also some mistrust between the teams, perhaps because they didn't know each other and they were located far apart. So it was a really challenging context to come into. But we arranged a week of kickoffs, and we came together in one location. And during this kickoff, we invested time in just introducing ourselves and really personally learning about each other. So for example, we considered that we knew more about the team, we understood what their hobbies were. We learned that actually the majority of the team members had musical skills. So we did lots around icebreakers and collaborative games. And together we created our team vision and our mission statement and visited, areas of our product strategy and goals. And then I asked the team to work together as an exercise, as part of bonding and starting to learn how to solve problems. And I gave them clear objectives on organizing themselves to form teams. So they worked together, they formed teams, each with a mission based on key product domain areas of responsibility. In some teams, we had representation from every country, and this was really interesting. They were forming a team where they would work together every day, and yet they were all living in different countries. And I'd like to add that this wasn't the first time I'd worked with teams in this capacity, but within the business, this was unusual, and other people were surprised at how this could ever work. So the next challenge was to facilitate the team's way of working. So we ran sessions on Agile and frameworks and culture and principles. Scrum Masters, product owners went on specialized training courses, and the teams were trained also. We had coaches to provide ongoing support so that our teams were able to go through the Agile transformation journey. Some of them settled on Scrum, others on Kanban, depending on the context of their work. So Kanban seemed to work well with the maintenance teams that were focused on fixing bugs and maintaining the software. And at the end of the day, it was their choice with the help of the coaches. And I can honestly say this wasn't an easy journey at all, but we settled into a new way of working. And the time frame from the creation of this new globally distributed team to their ability to be productive and start to release product features to market was approximately 4 months. So we invested a lot in really building the teams, organizing their missions, their roles, their ways of working, because that was really important. So what challenges did we face? Of course, we had issues. We did have a few individuals who just couldn't work within a global context, and some who were against working in agile mode or having to learn new skills. So some people found it hard to work with people in other countries rather than having that daily face-to-face contact with team members. And of course, there were language issues. The hardest part was removing barriers around nationality and cultural misunderstandings. And when it came to communication, the teams were creative because they came up with new ways to help each other. This included how they spoke slower, how they kept language straightforward, how they used video conferencing to get better cues during conversations, and how email could help with understanding, sending an email to someone before they had a conversation with them so they could read ahead. And then they asked for opportunities for face-to-face meetings as well. So thankfully, we were able to allow them to travel to each other's office locations, not many times, but a few times for those important meetings and for the benefit of continuing to build those important working relationships. There were also time zone issues, as you can imagine, which were factored into a pattern of work. So for instance, preserving lunch periods and summer holidays were really sacred to colleagues in some countries. And different public holidays needed to be fully navigated so that they didn't become an issue. So in addition to that, the start and end of the day was different for different people in different countries. So coordinating that was sometimes difficult, especially when it came to agile ceremonies. Having heavy technical conversations is quite difficult to do in a different language remotely. So design sessions were important in how they were organized, and mostly if they could do it face-to-face, better. But if not, then there were ways that they were able to think about how they communicated carefully to get those technical language and concepts across with lots of collaborative tools. So we essentially had several key challenges. In summary, communication was by far the strongest challenge. Understanding that different people had different skills and knowledge gaps, and trying to block that and plug the gaps with knowledge sharing sessions was really important. And then agility, so different people had different levels of experience. Some people were against it and needed more support. So we actually also identified agility champions in the teams who were able to support team members to come on board. And then, as I had mentioned, the coaching really helped people. Quality was another concern there, and then also balancing bug fixing and maintenance versus new feature development. And finally, bringing about best joint practices was really important. So how did we overcome these challenges? Well, there were lots of things we had to do. And one of them was supporting people with language lessons so that they could have a better understanding from a common language. As I mentioned, face-to-face travel was necessary, but also day-to-day using collaboration tools, teleconferencing, speaking slowly, etc. And initially, we did lots around praise and recognition to help people to share their respect and appreciation of each other and their work and the way that they were able to collaborate. And we encouraged a lot of transparency around the work we did with appropriate tooling, even the way we configured Jira, road mapping tools, to make it absolutely clear and that there was no ambiguity and for the purposes of having visibility of work. We did annual kickoffs, which were actually fantastic in bringing everyone together in one location. And we invited not just the development teams, but also colleagues from other functions around the business, such as sales and customer services, and so on. And these sessions were really useful in acknowledging successes and looking forward to planning together the next year based on our business goals, but also listening to shareholders and feeding their requirements into the way we were going to approach the following year. And I found that bringing people together in this way was a huge morale and productivity boost. People had been concerned that with geographically mixed Scrum teams, it was going to be a challenge, and it was initially, but we found that it became the norm as the weeks turned to months, and we started to see big improvements in the longer term. We were able to overcome some major impact in the ability for teams to continue to improve and deliver. And one of the ways we did that was we really turned retros into actions quickly to really feed that continuous improvement culture. And I saw all of this as very positive. We were able to remove barriers and increase learnings. We were able to understand better, collaborate better, and create a really positive culture. It proved the point that it is hard and it takes time, but globally distributed agile teams can be just as successful as co-located teams. In terms of ways of working and the outcomes, people did settle into their teams. They formed strong bonds through close collaboration, despite the fact that they were far apart in terms of distance. And we saw a huge turnaround in velocity, whereas initially most of the effort was fixing bugs. We transformed our efforts in delivering new features, and we improved the quality of our product, which was really important, to the extent that within a year, we had significantly reduced the number of bugs. And then the team started to be more self-organizing, and they started to engage in innovative ideas and working methods. They learned from each other, they addressed problem solving. And I think with the very richness of our diverse ways of working, we actually brought different perspectives, solutions, and ideas into the way we worked. And I think that made us much more successful. They also brought stories from their local customers that fed into discussions. So it created a better rounded understanding of our global ecosystem, far better than I think one team in one country would have been able to achieve. And when we think that a key agile principle is about putting the customer first, this is one strong benefit of having globally distributed teams. And I have to say, it was a real richness that the team created, and it was a constant learning experience for us. Today, a lot has changed. As we know, COVID has really entered our lives. And yet, despite all of this, competition in the technology industry continues to accelerate. It requires an increased agility where companies need to be far more productive in bringing products and solutions to market. And yet skills are short. So that means that in order to stay competitive, businesses need to think more globally. This means that there is more of a need today for a global distributed model, and companies are looking at creative solutions to address their skills shortages and to have a presence in markets around the world. So it certainly includes hiring permanent staff outside their local countries or expanding their staff through outsourcing models where they're able to scale up or down more rapidly and flexibly across the globe without the overhead of managing permanent staffing issues. And I've certainly seen this happening more often recently. Companies are also widening their global outreach further into other continents like Africa and South America to invest in the skills and the talent there. So really the trend is seeing the distribution of workforces going truly global. And the diverse nature of global teams means that people now have more input from local markets into the solutions that they're creating. And I think this is really essential for a product to be successful at this level. Due to the pandemic itself, companies have mostly had to switch to a remote model as they continue to increase their productivity. And unfortunately, this does make the context extremely challenging, as I'm sure that you've probably seen. And there have been many reports that despite all of this, companies have seen productivity continuing to increase. So especially those that have been agile in nature, I certainly have seen that even within my own teams, and it has been well reported, companies have seen that those that were used to operating geographically or remotely and that have been practicing agility were able to switch quickly without significant disruption. The State of Agile report is a survey. They report their report every year, and they did a survey that they carried out recently. And they shared that only 3% of companies are planning to return to the office full time. And I think the answers in Slack pretty much confirms this. 25% have said that they're remaining fully remote, and by far, 56% are in favor of the hybrid approach, with people returning to the office for a portion of their time and working from home for the rest. And then I saw another survey which says that only 12% of people want to return full-time to the office, and 72% of people want to do a hybrid remote office model. And certainly in my company, we've gone for the hybrid approach, which I think is the majority of people in this audience today. So it's pretty interesting how the industry has really transformed in just over a year. Equally, in the past year, since 2020, we've seen Agile adoption skyrocket. It's gone from something like 27% to 86% in 2021 and still increasing, which is pretty immense. And it hasn't happened just in technology teams, but in other areas of businesses because they want to really achieve increased business outcomes through agility. Obviously, by far, software engineering is the highest area for this adoption. And by its nature, Agile development has the concept of incremental delivery in short sprints. So teams are able to adapt to changes. And I think this has really helped sufficiently, especially during this challenging time. It also encourages close collaboration, right? So within teams, they're supposed to be working closely together, ideally face-to-face, meeting frequently to work and discuss progress and challenges. And we've got this distributed model now, which says that it's not possible to do that. And as a result, it is possible that you can have delays to work. So if a team member is in a different time zone to another one, they have to really think carefully about how they schedule their work to avoid bottlenecks and also to continue to sustain their velocity. And then when it comes to outsourcing and embedding people into teams, one thing that needs to be considered is really thinking about how they bring those people in, embed them with the work culture, and really help them to feel like part of the team, the company, and the mission. So it's important to invest time and money in building that team culture. For example, participating in virtual team events, one-to-ones, team socials, whatever it takes to really get people to feel very, very integrated. And the other thing I see is that the traditional kind of working pattern, typically 9 to 5 or whatever it is, can no longer exist because companies will have to be more flexible. It is necessary to be able to continue to move forwards. And it also needs more effort from managers to support a working model which brings the entire distributed team together and empowers them to build a global culture. So for example, there's things that can still happen. Engineers can still pair program, but they need the right tools to be able to do that effectively. So I wanted to share a few key learnings. Apologies, I'll just drink my water. And these are the learnings that I've encountered along the way. First of all, put time and effort into establishing really good communication practices so that teams are able to continue to be absolutely clear in terms of understanding, especially where you have language changes or challenges. Common goals are really important to maintain efficiency, to be aligned in order to achieve the missions. And really helping teams to focus on the mission is important to make sure that they're all heading the right direction. And then building in the time for team ceremonies where it benefits everyone so that they're able to commit to those times is important. Transparency is even more important now than ever before. But in addition to that is trust and accountability. So as a leader, you can't be in the same room as everybody. So you need to learn to trust them. But trust comes with accountability. And this is where the right balance is needed to enable the team to achieve their goals. And also the team will need to rely on tools that provide clear transparency of their goals, their work, the improvements they're making, visibility of bottlenecks, and agreement of how they will be resolved. And then also thinking about understanding the rhythm of global working. There'll be holidays that are different, time schedules, being able to narrow in on how to deliver and work effectively on a global scale. It's really important to integrate cultural diversity and respect that while building out a team culture, which really embraces differences in the way people work. And still, face-to-face is important, although it's likely to happen less, but opportunities for these events will certainly improve morale. It'll improve collaboration, working relationships, and productivity. And then the collaborative tools will help to support work practices, and that's really key. You don't have to give up pair programming. If anything, if you want to accelerate knowledge sharing remotely, pairing is a really good way to do that. Teams will also need to be aligned in their quality practices, and there is a need to make sure there is a disciplined and consistent approach to doing that, so that essentially the right solutions and the right level of quality is being delivered to customers consistently. Getting the benefit of the global context of your customers is something that you can achieve much more easily through a globally distributed workforce. So in summary, this isn't straightforward. It has many, many benefits, and putting the time and effort and the patience it requires to establish a globally distributed workforce, especially in this new world, will really pay dividends. Thank you for listening. Apologies for my voice.
And thank you very much for this talk. During your talk, we had quite a few questions coming up. So let me start with the first one. So every working with distributed teams, every collaboration with a person is actually a meeting, probably an online meeting. So how would you say how to find this happy middle, not to overwhelm with the meetings, but on the other hand, still ensure the good communication? What's actually the middle point there?
Yes, absolutely right. Because the challenge becomes where there are too many meetings and not enough time to focus and do productive work. So that really needs a discipline around. So some of the practices will be about times for having those meetings. Stand-ups are great for agreeing on what needs to happen, identifying problem points, and then agreeing on the next steps. And then allowing teams to actually have time aside to really focus on their work. It means that companies have to think about reducing the number of meetings, but also providing collaborative tools where people can connect with each other. Slack is a good tool, for example, for having conversations online. And then also, Zoom, the number of times that you spend on Zoom, really think about reducing those conversations. It's good to have face-to-face time, but when it takes that time away from your ability to be productive, then it's counterproductive. So it's really about balancing out what's agreed in one-to-ones or in stand-ups, and then leaving teams to focus on being productive.
What about when you have time difference between teams, different time zones, sometimes even 9, 12 hours difference? How do you approach the meetings there? How do you approach the work in the distributed team?
I think the most difficult one is between continents. So, for example, between Europe and North America, the time that you have to actually spend quality time as a team together is so much narrower. So, it's really looking at when your day is ending and where their day is starting, and it's a very narrow window. And in those cases, the point there is to think about how you can work more independently so that you're not really highly dependent on teams in another country to get work done. Otherwise, you really will start to create delays and slow down productivity. In Europe, it's not so bad because obviously the time differences are maybe 1 or 2 hours between countries. And there again, it's about agreeing on when you can collaborate, when you can meet. So one way to do that with large time zones is to split up the work and the teams so that they're much more independent with fewer dependencies between their work, so that you can work in a way that doesn't slow you down. And then obviously you will have to rely heavily on the collaborative tools for being able to send messages. But again, just think about how you can reduce that kind of friction in work and dependencies across the different teams.
Of course, we have a comment here that's really difficult to combine Australia, Europe, and United States. That will be quite a challenge.
Oh, yes. And I think the banking world solved that by doing like a round the clock method of handing over work, which I kind of I have seen working quite well. So yeah, that's really about reducing the integration points. It is challenging.
But still having meetings. There's no
Still
world where
having
we don't have
meetings.
to have meetings.
Absolutely.
So what would you say are the main reasons to create a distributed team? Why not do it in the same time zone, for instance, or in the same country? What do you say are the main reasons?
I've seen the benefits in several ways. Certainly skill sets. Sometimes it's about having access to a global set of talent. Having a presence in a country globally as well is really important. If you want as a business to be able to accelerate growth and to be productive, it is very hard to do it in just a small number of locations for sure. So it's having access to much wider talent. Naturally, you definitely want to start as close to home as possible because it's much more manageable. And the further you go away from your home country, the more expensive and challenging it is. But certainly it gives you access to new markets, access to new sets of tools and talent, and also an understanding of that local market and how you can bring that into building a much more global product that's compelling to customers.
Mm-hmm. And how would you say an Agile approach helps with that? How an Agile approach helps with work in distributed teams?
I think with Agile, because there is Agile to me is more of a mindset. It's about being adaptable and being receptive to change, but we also have very clear ceremonies. We're much more transparent. So the ability to be transparent and adapt to changes means that it's also the way that we work. It's in the way that we can, show exactly progress of the work we're doing, the ability to plan together and have a lot of clarity about what we're trying to deliver on a frequent basis means that we're not having to have a long period of time before we deliver features, and it allows us to also divide up the work that we're doing across different teams, whether they're local or further away. And conversations is the important thing as well. So teams having conversations about how to kind of work and collaborate together allows them to be much more set up to work in a distributed environment. I know the argument is always that people are not co-located, they're not working face to face, and they're not standing in front of a board. But thankfully, we've got tools today that allow us to be much more productive or as productive as being face to face. There are obviously some negatives, but we've got enough of that capability these days to still be successful.
What about a situation when we do have teams that work in the different time zones, as we said before, but there's one team that has part of a team in one time frame and the other part in different time frame? Would you say they still should work as a one team, or is it more of a two teams right now with two set of values, two set of definitions of done or whatever they imply in their day-to-day basis? How would you approach that?
I think that one is really challenging, and I've seen those sorts of teams where you have members in like one country, like North America, and another in Europe or the UK, and it can lead to burn out in that some people have to work late, or some people have to work really early, and their days become longer, and that is something that, as much as possible, we should probably rethink that, because I think that's challenging. So there are different ways of doing that. It's either the team agree that there are far less touch points and that there isn't going to be clear collaboration, or it's very limited, or they try to create teams in different locations, or sub-teams, if you like, and have just a few representatives being part of, say, a Scrum of Scrums type setup, where the Scrum Masters are coming together and they're representing the team and really talking about challenges and problems, and then taking the solutions back into the teams for local conversations. So those are maybe some of the approaches that can be taken, but otherwise you could get into a situation where you're just actually compounding the problem and people are just ending up exhausted and frustrated and burnt out.
Exactly. And most of the time they say Agile isn't working, Scrum isn't working, so we need to change something. So to jump on that, why do you think those companies say that Agile isn't working?
I think there are lots of companies that don't say Agile is working. And to me, it's either they don't understand what Agile is as a framework, or they haven't really thought creatively about how to apply the Agile principles and ways of working into their teams. So I totally agree with you. There are lots of times when people will say Agile doesn't work. But again, I just wonder about whether they're thinking about how they're applying it correctly.
Yes, and we still have time for one more question. So I promised to ask you about your book because it's really interesting for me. So I will display the title of your new book right now. And can you please tell us a bit of what it's about?
So the book, Beyond Digital Transformation, and I think I've got a copy here, is a book I wrote. It took about a year and a bit to write, and it talks a lot about maturity in the tech industry, and basically the lack of. It talks a lot also about customer first, satisfying the needs of the customer, and about agile approaches, and while agility helps businesses to be successful and able to deliver solutions for their customers. And then it also represents how ways in which we can accelerate our ability to deliver solutions and for businesses to grow and also meet their targets overall, for the benefit of continuing to build out their maturity and their practices.
I see. I see. Well, let me just have a quick look. Do we have any more questions coming back from the audience? I guess at the moment we run up with all the questions. So Nana, thank you very much for your talk. And I will invite you and everybody to join you on Slack channel, which is called the name of your talk. And you can follow up there with any more questions you might have.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it.